Hello. So my name is Matt Bishop, Managing Director of Diagonal Comms, and I'm joined by Caitlin Wood, who is a racing driver.
I am. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, Caitlin. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
So we first met and worked together 5 years ago it is now.
Yeah.
2019 at W Series, when I was the comms director of W Series and you were racing in W Series.
Yeah.
But I'll talk about W Series a bit later. First of all, I just want to let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, so ultimately I'm a 27-year-old Australian racing driver and I've been racing since I was 7. I started through kind of wanting to follow in my brother's footsteps. There's quite a big age gap between myself and him, so he's 12 years older than me.
So you were 7, he was 19.
Yeah.
And what was he racing in?
He would have been in senior Rotax or something, or senior clubman, I think we had back home in Australia. Yeah, and on my 7th, well, I'd been nagging Dad for years, and I wasn't allowed to go until I was 7 because that's the age in Australia. And so on my 7th birthday, got my first go-kart, was ecstatic, and Dad and Luke took me out to our local kart track, Newcastle Kart Club. And I didn't make it past the first corner. I was straight off into the gravel trap. So my poor dad had lots of running around to do after me, but ultimately I loved it. And I guess from literally that day, I've never not been involved in motorsport throughout my life, yeah.
So that was Newcastle, New South Wales.
Yeah.
And your upbringing, I mean, we know, we'll come to this, money is a big issue for racing drivers, but yours was a normal upbringing, was it not? You're not from mega wealthy parents.
No, I think it's a very honest upbringing. I was really fortunate. I had a lovely childhood. Like, looking back at it, is, you know, I grew up on acreage in Australia, which is quite normal, to be fair. And we're always outside on quad bikes or motorbikes, go-karts, lawnmowers. It was whatever we could get our hands on. Yeah, literally.
Wheels and an engine.
Yeah. And, you know, it was really nice. And yeah, ultimately karting was a family hobby to begin with. And it was just something that, you know, instead of playing cricket or football or whatever on weekends, we'd be lucky enough to kind of travel up and down Australia with my dad and my brother to go karting. And yeah, I guess it wasn't until I was a little bit older, it's probably the ages of 12 or 13, when I really realized this is actually something that I like and enjoy and I'd like to do more of it.
And you were good at.
Yeah, I wasn't bad.
So let's stay in Australia for a little while, because one of the things we're going to talk about is single-seaters versus, you know, tin tops or GT cars or touring cars and so on and so forth. But you kicked off, obviously, karting, as you just explained, but then you also did some Aussie Formula Ford first, then Formula 4. So what was that thinking? Did you want to be, you know, did you want to be Formula 1 world champion at that time? Was that the kind of thought that you wanted to progress on single-seaters? Or?
Yeah, I think it's like any young racing driver when you're in the peak levels of karting, isn't it? You know, you're competing at national levels and you're trying to compete against the best. My dad always had, not this theory, but he's right. If you want to be the best, you got to compete against the best. So he would throw me in the deep end tenfold just to see if I could swim. And, you know, I learned so much by doing that. But yeah, my progression was into Formula Ford out of go-karts. And ultimately, for me, it wasn't a fluke, but it was just an opportunity that was there. So again, my brother had made that step into Formula Ford quite a few years before me. And the car was just in a million pieces in the shed at home and had been there for years. I think it was like a Mexican standoff between my dad and my brother, who was going to put it back together, and no one did, so it was just there. Ultimately, I think I was 15, and I remember being out in the shed with Dad with the go-karts, and I was like, when's it my turn? When do I get to drive this? And Dad was shocked. He's like, oh God, not again. I could just tell he thought about it for a minute, and he's like, okay, well, if you can put it back together, you can race it. Right. And I thought, and I was like, okay, can't be that hard. So I was like, yeah, sure, why not? Let's give it a go. And over those Christmas holidays, which is our summer, I just spent that time kind of rebuilding the car with Dad. And don't get me wrong, I'm surprised all 4 wheels stayed on. I didn't know what I was doing. But it was just the fact I was there with him, willing to put in the effort. And ultimately, yeah, after a couple of months, we ended up taking it out, and I did my first test day, and I actually drove a Formula Ford before I was allowed to drive on the road. So
Right.
I stalled about 10 times before trying to figure out how to use a clutch pedal, and that's how I got into Formula Ford. And it's such a really kind of special way to get started, because I think if that wasn't there in the shed or whatever, I don't know if I would have had that opportunity to progress. So it was a really nice way to get started, and it was still a family thing. So it was like our own little race team. My dad and my brother would essentially run me, and yeah, we started in state championships like New South Wales or Queensland State in Australia. Yeah.
And so, but that went well. You enjoyed
Yeah.
Formula Ford.
Yeah,
Did
I loved
okay.
it. Yeah, we did well. Obviously, when you're first getting into it, it's just your rookie years. We finished third in the state championships, and then the car I was racing, the one that we rebuilt, was quite old in comparison to I think it was about 7 years old in comparison to what we're competing against. So it must have been 2013 or 14, I then made the step up into a race team, like my first ever race team, which was Synergy Motorsport. And that kind of was I needed that stepping stone to really progress.
Because that was a new car then, a competitive car.
Competitive car, yeah. And so then we competed in the national championship alongside V8 supercars. So that was a really good opportunity for me, and something that I look back at it and I loved it. We were only able to do 1.5 years of this because, again, we kind of ran out of budget, ran out of sponsorship and that stuff. So it was we were doing pretty good, but it's just one of those things.
But then you did do Formula 4.
Yeah, I did.
Still in Australia.
Yeah, still in Oz. So it was just an opportunity that came about. There was essentially I'd had a sponsor, Jayco Caravans, and they were willing to kind of get me into F4, which was like that next step up. You know, obviously wings
Quicker
and slicks.
Car.
Yeah. And we were able to kind of jump on that. So I only ended up doing 2 rounds at the end of that year, but it was great. It was a really good learning curve and another kind of experience for me to understand the different pathways in motorsport.
So it's an interesting word that you've chosen there, pathways, because one of the decisions you then made was not to stay in Australia, was to come to Europe.
Yeah.
So tell us about when, why, and what were you hoping for?
I didn't know what I was hoping for. It was a bit of a...
And how old were you then?
18.
18, right. So still a young woman.
Yeah. I'd never lived out of home. So ultimately, the F4 drive happened. It was great, but unfortunately, that sponsorship wasn't going to carry on for the following year. So yeah, at 18, you're like, oh, my life's over. I'm never going to go racing. Meltdown. But you kind of regroup and you figure it out, and ultimately, just fate, realistically, out of nowhere, I got contacted by a team called Rider Engineering based out in Germany, asking me if I wanted to be a part of their junior program, which was in European GT4. And at first I kind of looked at it and I just thought it was a spam email. I'm like, oh God, that's not real. Another week later, I got a follow up and they're like, do you want to have a phone call? And I was like, actually, Dad, I think this is real. And so then we did the phone call and we went through it all, and you know, they were interested because they had a new program, and ultimately where, you know, they were promoting to try and get females into the championship as well. So it was really appealing to me and appealing for me to go and race in Europe. Long story short, we ended up Dad ended up taking out a loan, and I remember he sat me down at the dinner table and he's like, this is all we can do. He's like, you know, you can move, you know, you're going to move to Germany, give it your best shot. And the thing that kind of kept us going with this opportunity was if you won this championship, the junior program, you then got a fully funded drive the following year. So for me, it's like, right, I have progression. It's not just a 1-year stint. I can actually sustain it in Europe. And he said, you know, an Aussie racing driver, not many Aussies get to go and race in Europe at tracks like Spa and Monza. He's like, so go and enjoy yourself. If you win, you do well, that's amazing. You can stay over there. If it doesn't work out, enjoy it and come back home and go to uni and get a job and sort your life out. I think that was enough motivation to keep going. So yeah, I got up and I moved to Germany, and at first I didn't have anywhere to stay. It's just living in hotels or people's couches.
Didn't speak German?
Did not speak German, no. So when I went to the supermarket, I always accidentally bought turkey instead of chicken because I couldn't tell the difference. And then that's when I met Naomi Schiff, and after she was working for Reiter, And she obviously saw that I had nowhere to stay, and she asked me if I wanted to live with her, and I ended up living with her for 18 months and fortunately won that Young Stars Championship, and that promoted me into GT3.
Well, you say fortunately, but a bit of skill,
Yeah, a little bit of driving in there.
Yeah, well done.
Yeah, and we won that, and that was in GT4. So then I got that promotion into GT3 with Reiter. That was into Blancpain in their Lamborghini Gallardo. So it was a bit of a, for a 19-year-old at that point, it was a bit of a whirlwind of an opportunity, and something I was really, really grateful to be a part of.
Well, and actually very enterprising of you at 18 to, come, you'd never been outside Australia, you'd never lived outside Australia.
No.
And to go all the way across the world to a country that you don't speak. I know a lot of Germans speak English.
Yeah.
But, it's still not like being in an English-speaking country.
No, and we lived in a very rural town, so nobody really kind of spoke English.
There you are. And also being a racing driver, or trying to be a racing driver, or trying to get up the ladder as a racing driver is hard enough for anyone, but particularly hard for women, for girls, I think. But your dad took out a loan to send you across to Germany, but he had to take out a loan to do that, didn't he? Yeah. Anyway, you did GT4, you did GT3, and in the Lamborghini, and then you did Lamborghini Super Trofeo, didn't you?
Yeah.
So how did that go?
It was good. It was, like I said, a bit of a spiral kind of year. So I spent 2 years in Germany. At the end of the Blancpain series, we had a podium in the Silver Cup. It was great. But again, my German visa was expiring, so I didn't have an opportunity to renew it. So I kind of had to, in my eyes, not start again, but think of a new base. So I ended up going back to Australia for 2 months to see my family over Christmas. And I was sitting there like getting a part-time job, twiddling my thumbs, and I'm like, oh God, this is not for me. So I just told Mum and Dad, I was like, okay, I'm going to go to the UK. And they're like, all right, if you want. I mean, I'd kind of been in touch with a team here, and I just, on the phone, I'm like, look, if you can get me a place to stay and a job, then I'll be there. And yeah, 6 weeks later, I got on the plane. I met them at the airport, and thankfully there was a place to stay, which was just a share house in Tamworth of all places, and that job ended up being Motorsport. So that's how I started over here in the UK, and that the drive was, like you said, in Lamborghini Super Trofeo, which was a great opportunity. Again, we only did selected rounds because of budget, and we did Monza, which was amazing. I think it's the fastest I've ever gone in a race car around there. So yeah, it was a really cool opportunity and something to kind of get me started in the UK, and yeah, started coaching and instructing and opening myself up to the motorsport industry and that side of things as well over here.
Coaching and instructing, a lot of drivers do that. I was going to say have to do that.
Yeah, have to pay bills.
Have to pay bills. But is it enjoyable as well, doing that?
It has its days.
Yeah. And it's not always enjoyable.
No, it's just like any job. Don't get me wrong, I have some really brilliant days, and you work with some amazing people that are just as enthusiastic about motorsport as you. And that's ultimately what it comes down to. But at the end of the day, it's dangerous. I being young, when I first moved over, I didn't care. I was like, oh, it is what it is. And I'm not old by any means, but the more you do it, there's only so many times you want to get put into a barrier when you're not driving, and you don't have control of that. So yeah, there's pros and cons to anything, but I do truly enjoy working with people that want to be better drivers and just kind of seeing, I guess, my advice work for them. And everybody coaches differently, and everybody has their own kind of techniques and what works well. But working at Motorsport definitely helped for me as a driver just accelerate my growth in being able to jump in a car and just be ready, because we're kind of always in a car, whether we're driving or not. You still feel everything. You can definitely feel when they get it wrong, so you know what not to do.
You probably know before them.
Absolutely, 100%.
So we talked about pathways, and we've talked about single-seaters, and we've also talked about tin tops, or whatever you want to call them, GT cars. Your next move was back to single-seaters, wasn't it?
Yeah.
W Series. We'll talk about that in a minute. But at that point, did you have a feeling about whether or not you were naturally gifted into single-seaters, or you prefer tin tops or GT cars, or you like the big, heavy, powerful car, or you like the nifty car with, aero everywhere.
Yeah.
Yes, different types of downforce.
I think at that point in time, I'd fallen in love with endurance racing because I'd kind of made that step. To me, or single-seater experience before W Series was Formula Ford and F4, which was brilliant. I love Formula Ford. It's, the fundamentals. It gets you going. It teaches you loads. But it wasn't the true single-seater experience. So I think I did fall in love with the GT aspect, and I fell in love with endurance tenfold and, experienced what a 24-hour race is like, and just everything that's involved with that. And it's so much more than lap times. Well, obviously you've got to put good lap times in, but you've got to put them in for 24 hours. And you've got to keep the car alive, and you've got to stay out of trouble, and you've got to get your pit stops right. So there was so much more.
You've got to drive in the night.
In the night, yeah, absolutely. And so I fell in love with that. I can't, and I still am. I still love endurance racing. I love the camaraderie that it brings, the fact that it does truly turn it into more of a team sport. Don't get me wrong, we all know motorsport is a team sport, but if you've got Max Verstappen and Checo out on the competing against each other, it's not a team sport at that point. So it was a whole different environment that I'd never experienced before, and it really opened my eyes up to something that I truly loved. Yeah.
But nonetheless, you went to W Series.
Yeah.
But that was probably because it was free.
Yes. Ultimately,
one of
yes.
the reasons.
Yeah, one of the reasons, yeah.
Because, one of the refrains that we will find that happens in this interview, and not unique to you by any means.
A lot of people.
A lot of people, the biggest bugbear, the biggest worry is money.
Yeah.
Anyway, W Series was announced in 2018. I know this because I made the announcement. I was the comms director. And we started racing in 2019.
Yeah.
And if you remember, we had quite an exhaustive selection process.
Yeah, I do remember. I'll never forget that.
Yeah, well, there were two stages, wasn't there? We went to Melk in Austria, where it was filthy weather. Actually, not just raining, but bits of snow.
Yeah, and ice, yeah.
Yeah, and that was in Fords and Porsches, but road cars.
Yeah.
And then those who passed, there were 56 candidates, and we had to whittle it down to 28. You were one of the 28 successfully. You did well, actually.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was fun, but you did, I remember noticing, and of course, Alex Wirtz was running it for us. I remember him saying, that the ones to watch and so on. It was nice that you got through that, and you did. Next stage, we went to Almeria.
Yeah, in Spain.
Very different weather. South of Spain, arid, basically desert, really. That was in the Tatus Formula 3 car, the regional Formula 3 car, which is the car that W Series raced. So not FIA Formula 3 International Dallara car.
No, that interim
car,
yeah.
But about 100 bhp less as well, but still wings and slicks, and a different kind of car from what you'd driven before as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how did Almeria go?
It went really well.
Well, I know that because you passed through.
Yeah, it was, again, an eye-opener and extremely enjoyable. For me, it was kind of the first experience in a car like that. Obviously, you did all the preparation, you did everything as well as you could to be at the best level you could be going into it. And Almeria was a really interesting track as well. I don't think hardly any of us had been there before when we went for the shootout. So it was a really good base to go to because no one was a local, there was no upper hand, it was all pretty even and spread across the board. And yeah, I just kind of fell into it really well, and I knew from people's advice that had kind of helped along the way what to focus on, and we did good. And I remember Dave Ryan, he broke it up into 2 stages, didn't he? And on like the 3rd day,
he was the racing director.
Yeah.
Obviously Dave Ryan, ex-McLaren.
Yeah.
34 years at McLaren. I worked with him at McLaren. 34 years. One of those people you can say he's forgotten more about racing than most people will ever know. Anyway, carry on.
After we did so many different assessments, on track, off track, fitness, all that kind of stuff, and I think it was after like 3 days they changed the program, and we all like, oh God, what's going to happen? And he actually announced the 12 that were going to make it through straight away that I think we were kind of a little bit further down the line than some others, and I was one of those 12, and it was just like, I just remember being there, it was just such a relief, and they're like, you can't tell anybody, and I was like, what? I can't tell anybody? But it's that phone call after, you know, the day or two to tell Dad and my family, it was such a nice feeling to know that you'd truly earned it. You'd gone through all the stages, you'd given it everything you could, and you deserved that opportunity.
Well, you did, and you were one of the top 12.
Yeah.
Then we found then there was the next cohort,
stage,
which came down to the finding the other 8, so that 20 would go forward and race in 2019 in W Series, which you obviously did.
Yeah.
Now, you never won a W Series race, but you had a few good placings across your 2 seasons.
Yeah.
Tell us some highlights.
Well, W Series was really cool. I think being on the DTM platform was awesome. I loved DTM, and I thought it was a really great place for W Series to be a part of. In its first year, I think just the excitement around it, and I think everybody beforehand were like, oh, how's it going to work? Because none of us girls or women had ever just competed against women. We'd all grown up competing against the guys. And I don't think we even knew if we were all going to get on or anything, but it actually worked out really well. I'd say most of us all got on. Yes, okay, there's always an incident or two, and just like anything, you shake hands. Exactly, you shake hands, you get over it, and you get on with it. And so the environment that was around it was way more opening and enjoyable than I think any of us even thought. But yeah, being alongside W Series was awesome. It was a great opportunity. The first season wasn't the best for me. I had a couple of issues, so we didn't actually finish some of those races, and because there was only 6 races, it was very detrimental for the championship overall positioning. But I think my highlight alongside W Series was racing at Spa in 2021. You
were 5th, were you not, I think?
Yeah, I was the reserve driver, and it was the 5th round of the championship, and they're like, all right, Caitlin, jump in. And I was like, thank God, finally. And yeah, I got in and I qualified 3rd, and I was just like, see, Dave, I can do it. Yeah, and then the race was in the wet. That was when F1 got cancelled, but we were the previous day, so we were still able to race. And yeah, it was soaking wet, and it was great, and we finished 5th alongside that year, probably racing at Coda in Texas and racing on the F1 platform there, because the atmosphere is surreal, and just being a part of that environment, being alongside Puma as well, joining the Puma family. It was a great opportunity, I think, for a lot of us women to be introduced to brands of that scale. I think that's something that W Series did really well.
I think it did do a good and important job for a short time, and I'm absolutely supportive of and applaud the Formula One Academy, the F1 Academy now, but I don't think it would have happened if W Series hadn't paved the way, personally.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think W Series walked so F1 Academy can run.
Well put.
Yeah.
Well put.
I think, don't get me wrong, any new championship, gender aside, always struggles. And without the backing and the financial input, it won't survive. And I think you can always look back in hindsight and be like, oh, we should have done this, or we shouldn't have offered prize money, or we shouldn't have done this, or X, Y, Z. But the idea of it was just game changing, and it did change the game. Whether it changes it for any of us that competed in W Series or for the ones to come, I guess it's changed the game for somebody, which is important.
Indeed. I mean, I was only there for one season of racing, 2019.
Yeah.
Obviously, 2020, COVID came along.
Yeah.
And we did the
esports
league.
God, that was interesting.
You did all right in it, though.
We did all right, yeah.
By the way, one thing you'll notice is racing drivers always say we when they mean I.
Yeah.
It's just because of the team mentality. You're so used to saying we.
Yeah.
But you did do the esports. You did quite well, though, didn't you?
Yeah, I think...
I know it wasn't really your cup of tea.
No, I think the esports created more strain on the relationships between drivers than the actual driving. Like, I remember we were like screaming at each other across the intercoms, and they're like, girls, you need to calm down. They're like, it's so frustrating.
I remember actually once on a Teams call giving you all a group bollocking about it. Do you remember?
Yeah. I don't know what it was, but it set us all off.
I know. Anyway, it had to be done because of COVID, and we had to, keep racing in some way or other.
Yeah.
And we duly did do. Anyway, at the end of that, I left and I went to join Aston Martin. So I wasn't actually there for the demise of W Series, which is a great pity, as I say, but I think it played its important part. Anyway, that's the background. So now you haven't raced for about a year, have you?
Yeah, no.
Rusty but keen.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it.
So tell us what you're doing. I know what you're doing. You're doing the Porsche Sprint Challenge GB.
Yeah.
And by the way, we can see the car.
Yeah.
There it is, a Cayman GT4.
Yeah.
We can see your overalls.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about the branding in a minute because it's very obvious what it is. But tell us a little bit about just what that car's going to be like and what you're looking forward to in terms of getting in it, testing it, racing it, and all the rest of it.
Yeah, I think it's just exciting. And for me, it's something that I've been working on for so long to be in a race seat. Obviously, it sounds really simple for a lot of people, but there's so much that goes on behind the scenes. So to be able to I guess, attempt and try to put a program together is just a bit of a relief. So we've got some bits locked in. So yeah, Porsche Sprint Challenge GB, which is racing alongside the British touring cars. So the platform of racing onside the touring car weekends is great. It's a great opportunity to kind of get your name out there, and obviously it's on ITV, so free to air television and
live.
Yeah, live as well. Yeah, and last year the championship reached, I think their stats was over 14 million viewers across the season of 6 race weekends. So there was loads of different, I guess, points that drew me to this championship. One being I couldn't afford Carrera Cup. Obviously, that's the next step up, and then this kind of seemed like
your mate Abby Eaton's doing that, isn't she?
She's doing really well. Yeah, I couldn't quite reach that level, so we're like, what's the interim? And this kind of became an opportunity.
You couldn't
yeah,
reach.
Financially. Yeah. Driving wise, I'd give anything a go.
Yeah.
But yeah, and we put this together, and for me it was a breath of fresh air. Last year was pretty tough. I didn't do a lot of racing. Although when I did go racing, I raced out at the Nürburgring Nordschleife in the NLS Championship, so the Endurance Championship in production car. And I actually became the first Australian woman to win a race out there. I didn't even know I'd achieved it. But yeah, it was obviously NLS has over 200 cars in a race weekend, and it was in our production car, so BMW. But just to kind of be a part of that accolade was really cool.
And tell us about the Nordschleife, because it's an amazing circuit, isn't it?
The Nordschleife is insane. Yeah. I don't think there's another word for it. There's, it's 26 kilometers long, so there's however many
100
corners.
and something corners.
Yeah, 100 and something corners, and you have so much traffic, both faster and slower than you. So you've got GT3 cars that are willing to kind of bang you out of the way and get you out of the way, and you're also trying to overtake the ones in your class or the cars that are slower than you. So there's so much going on, and it taught me so much as a driver about, pushing to the limits, because you've also got no runoff. If you go off, you're going to hit a barrier. So getting comfortable.
Or a tree.
Yeah, that too. And getting comfortable in those kind of stressful environments, it definitely helped elevate, I think, my driving in that sense as well. Yeah.
Good for you. So anyway, you're not racing at the Nordschleife this year.
No, we're racing in the
UK. On the TOCA, which means the British Touring Car Championship support card.
Yeah.
And you're racing that car, and let's talk about the logo that we can see loud and clear, loud and proud, which is Barbie. So
it is.
Obviously, you need money to go racing. Every driver does. And tell us how that came about. How did Barbie come to the rescue of Caitlin Wood?
Yeah, like I said, last year was a bit of one of those seasons where there wasn't a lot put together, and I had a bit of a rough year in the sense I had a bit of a medical issue, so I had a tumour on my head that had to be removed. So I couldn't all good, all okay, but yeah, I had to have surgery, and it just really put things into a bit of perspective, because I couldn't wear a helmet for ages, so I couldn't actually do what I wanted to do. And I walked away from that, and I was like, I am going racing no matter what. And that's ultimately what it made me. And so I remember sitting down with Matt, my husband, and I was like,
I want to... That's not me, by the way.
I was like, I want to do this. And he's like, okay, well, he's like, if you could have any brand involved in your career, what would it be? And we wrote down, a list of brands, and ultimately Barbie was one of them. So then we decided to reach out.
That was building on the recent movie, obviously, you thought, yeah.
Yeah, but just from being a child as well.
Oh, right,
and I think, but the movie definitely, I think, re-sparked that, okay, they are standing up for really important societal issues, and I love that. So yeah, we reached out to a couple of these brands, and ultimately Barbie was the only one that kind of was interested in my story. And so I'd put a livery together, and I kind of put it all together for them, and they're like, well, why don't we jump on a call? And I was like, can I come and meet you guys? Can I come to your office? And they're like, yeah, okay, no worries. So then, I pushed for the in-person meeting, and yeah, me and Matt went down, and I remember we got taken into this pink room. It was great. And all of the people that I sat with were all women, and it was awesome. And I told them my story, and it was all created by us. We didn't have any, I guess, other help. And my story, our ideas, how we potentially could work together, what it means for us, and what it means to the motorsport industry to have a brand of this scale involved. And they called Matt Ken as well, so that I loved that. They're like, and we've got Ken. Ultimately, we all got on really well, and they liked what I stood for, which was ultimately what they stand for. And we kind of then developed that relationship over a while, and decided that I'd be their Barbie sports ambassador in 2024, and we'd collaborate together in my racing programs. And so the racing programs was Porsche Sprint Challenge. So I said I definitely want those colors on the side of the car to show all those young girls that anything's possible.
And you are the only woman racing in the Porsche Sprint Challenge GB this year, are you not? But you mentioned young girls, and one of the phrases I often think of in this kind of context is, if you can see it, you can be it.
Absolutely.
The famous phrase.
Yeah.
So that's always been difficult for girls who want to go racing, because, in Formula One, and I know Formula One is not the be-all and end-all, there's many, many, many other ways to have a successful and sustainable racing career, but it is nonetheless the one that everyone sees.
It's the pinnacle, yeah.
And there hasn't been a woman racing in Formula One for 48 years. Lella Lombardi, 1976, last time, yeah. And she was only the second that actually started a championship Formula One race.
Yeah.
The other was Teresa de Filippis, 58. So look, that's, and there's about 900 men and about 2 women, and the last one 48 years ago. So in terms of, if you can see it, you can be it. Well, you can't see it, so you can't be it.
Yeah.
Is the kind of feeling. So now, I know you're not in Formula One, but you are live on terrestrial television in the UK, which, by the way, Formula One is not.
Yeah, that's true.
That's it. You are live on ITV4, and therefore you can see it.
Yeah.
So how are you going to do other things to help young girls watching believe that they can actually also be it?
Yeah, so this was really important to me. Obviously, it's all well and good being out there with a pink car and making a statement and promoting the whole idea of being a woman in motorsport, but in my eyes, I actually want to do things as well. So alongside Barbie and my other partners, I'll be going to 2 schools or universities, colleges, whatever that is, per month, and it's all free, so they don't have to, I guess, pay for me to be there and come and speak to the students. And that's run through our social media campaigns to try and open it up to everybody across the country. It literally just ran my first one the other week. So yeah, I'll be going down to Exeter next month to speak with the students down there, because they had a motorsport college and they entered loads of times, and they're like, oh, we'd really like for you to come. So yeah, going to talk about STEM, which is really important, science, technology, and the
engineering
education
and maths.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
But not only about driving, but all the other job opportunities that are available in motorsport. Obviously, like you said, there's engineering, mechanics, journalism, team manager. There's loads of different
photography.
Yeah,
all of those things. Videography.
Everything. Yeah, everything. And so I think a lot of these industries are just overlooked because it's not spoken about, or the girls don't see that it's an available career choice. So ultimately, yeah, that's what I'm going to the schools about, to kind of open up their minds a little bit and hopefully introduce them into the world of motorsport. And then alongside that, bringing young girls to the race weekends. And that is alongside one of Barbie's charities, Inspiring Girls UK. And so that's kind of aged at around 8 years to 14 years old, and bring them to the race weekend for them to see the Barbie car in action and, you know, meet me, run some fun activations and some games with them. And ultimately, like you said, actually seeing that race car on track and hopefully seeing themselves reflected in an industry that they might not have seen before.
And look, I think that's massively commendable, and,
Okay.
and I wish you all the luck in the world with it. If you can see it, you can be it. It's as I say, and of course, you know, if you've got an 8-year-old girl, she's not going to approach visiting, watching your race in the same way as a 14-year-old girl, but you'll have to tailor your offering and what you show and tell across that. I mean, it can just be an exciting, fun weekend.
Absolutely.
But on the other hand, a 14-year-old who perhaps maybe doesn't want to be a racing driver, or doesn't think she can be a racing driver, or maybe does, because that's always a possibility. But I think it's so important what you've just said, which is she doesn't have to think that being an engineer or being a mechanic is only something her brother can do.
Exactly.
She can do it.
Yeah.
And so she'll meet you, but she'll probably meet your mechanics as well, won't she? And be able to understand what opportunities there might be. So, fantastically exciting opportunity, what you're doing. But we do see some real estate available on that car alongside the Barbie logo. And I'm going to say this, you can agree or disagree, but I think that that is a significant opportunity for other partners to get involved. Because if you think about it, you're the only woman racing in the series, the Porsche Sprint Challenge GB. Your car is going to stand out a mile, just look at it. It's got one of the biggest brands in the world on it, which most of the others have not. And there's available space. And it's live on terrestrial, free-to-air television, ITV4, which even mighty Formula One is not. So they'd be mad not to sponsor you, wouldn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I should have a line up out the door.
There you go. Well, you know, we'll do our best to try and see if we can persuade a few people to come along and be partners, because you're a great driver, you're a great person, and it's a great opportunity. But it's more than just racing.
Exactly.
There's a real mission.
Yeah.
I think, isn't there?
Yeah, I think that's exactly that. When I did my launch night a couple of weeks ago now, announcing Barbie and our collaboration and our partnership and what it entails, I think that was my whole point. Yes, I want to go racing, and ultimately we need the financial backing to do that. But it's the bigger message, and it's about, like we said, showing kids, boys and girls all around the world that they can be and do anything that they kind of set themselves up to do. And it's just that message of you can be anything. And for brands and companies to get involved with that, they're also, I guess, showing that they support those initiatives.
And care.
And care, yeah, for sure. And there's more to going racing for me. Like, the older I've gotten, the more I've understood. Don't get me wrong, I want to go out there and put it on pole position and get the wins and the podiums and all the results. But I guess the older I've gotten, the more I've understood that if I can just even make the smallest amount of difference in my time in the motorsport world, and it is only going to be very small in comparison to other people in the industry, it just makes the whole thing way more exciting, enjoyable, and you feel like you've passed something on to the next generation as well. So it's ultimately what I stand for. I like to try and stand up for what I believe in and try and give more women opportunities, and yeah, for partners to be involved with that, I think it's never a bad thing. And like you said, the marketing opportunities in this industry, I think motorsport marketing sometimes is undervalued. It's so valuable. I think if you were to pay for an advertisement on ITV for that company, how much would that cost you in comparison to getting behind a sports person and being involved in that aspect? So yeah, alongside all the marketing opportunities, we have some really great fun things to get involved with, like the hospitality at the race circuits, bringing clients, track days, all the fun stuff that's involved with motorsport, alongside with all the stuff that matters.
I'm hoping and actually expecting to see a few logos either side of Barbie sometime soon. I think that's a great thing. So let's go back. You talked about you wanted to get the podiums and you want to get the wins. Now, I know, I always used to advise as you know, I've worked with lots of drivers, not only you guys at W Series, but lots of Formula One drivers over the years. And I always used to say, don't overpromise. Don't overpromise. You might think you're going to win everything, but don't overpromise. But of course, drivers always think that, have that eagerness to win.
Yeah.
So, bearing that in mind, how do you see this season unfolding?
I think if I can stay there for the full season, that's a massive tick box for me, is to be able to compete for more than just a handful of rounds.
And again, you're talking about money again.
Yes, sorry. To be able to financially be there for the full season is a massive tick box in the right direction. Because like you said, I haven't actually done a full season since 2019. And I think for a career aspect, it's so important to be in the seat as often as possible. But in terms of results, again, I haven't done anywhere near enough testing as probably what everyone else has done. And I'm going in and I'll always do my best to represent myself, Australia, women, everyone well. For me, I'd love to get a podium.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'd love to get a podium. I can take it race by race. We've got 3 races across the weekend. Get a good
that's 6
qualifying.
weekends, 18 races across the year,
Yeah.
if you do the full year.
Yeah.
And they're great circuits, some of them, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell us, which ones are you looking forward to in terms of circuits have you raced on them all already?
Quite a few, yeah.
Okay, well, tell us
few.
about the ones you fancy or you've enjoyed before.
I think, our first round is at Snetterton, and I actually really enjoy Snet. It's such I think a quirky circuit. It's got everything. So in terms of a driver's perspective, you've got to really kind of nail that qualifying lap, because you've got so many different elements that come with it. So that makes it exciting. I enjoy qualifying. I enjoy that element of really, new set of tyres, find your space and just go for it. I really love that rush that qualifying brings. Alongside that, obviously Silverstone is always a great weekend, and I love racing on Brands Hatch GP, which is the last round of the year if we were to race there.
Fantastic circuit, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, Brands Hatch is a small circuit, not so mega, but
the GP loop.
But the GP is fantastic.
Lots of history, and it's a balls to the wall kind of circuit. You got to really kind of take that risk to get that last bit of time. So yeah.
When the British Grand Prix used to alternate in the 60s, 70s, and 80s between Brands Hatch and Silverstone, the drivers always preferred Brands Hatch.
Yeah,
they did.
I could never imagine nowadays an F1 car round Brands Hatch GP.
Well, I don't think a modern F1 car could go around.
No, I don't think they could. But even, after racing it on it myself in the W Series and everything like that, I couldn't imagine going around there as quick as the old F1 cars used to do. It's insane.
Yeah. It was great. I used to,
I can imagine.
I used to go and watch it.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Fantastic. You've talked about Nordschleife, Nürburgring. Talked about Brands Hatch. You're going to start talking about Bathurst in a minute, aren't you? I knew you were. Is that your favourite circuit?
I think so, yeah. How can it not be? I'm Australian.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm Aussie.
Tell us why it's so mega.
I think there's just so much to it. It's an Aussie icon. It's like Vegemite.
Well, we say Marmite is something you either like or don't like.
Yeah.
But Vegemite, all Australians like, don't they?
Everyone likes Vegemite and everyone likes Tim Tams. So that's just like Bathurst is the motorsport version of that. No, it's a bit like the Nordschleife. You've got to really take that risk to get the reward. And when it bites hard. So when you get that reward of getting that lap or finishing the race in a podium position or winning, it's surreal. I think it's just one of those circuits that really brings out all of the emotions in motorsport. And when you go to circuits and race weekends, I was lucky enough to compete in the Bathurst 12 hours, and it's such a high and then such a low when it goes wrong. And so it's just like, I think just that addiction of wanting to always go back and keep getting the results there. But it's the atmosphere, and I think for me being Aussie, it's the history behind it and the Bathurst 1000 and being a part of that spectacle and is something that's awesome to me.
So you've mentioned endurance racing, because here's the 12 hours you're talking about, and you've done 24-hour races. Obviously, you're not doing endurance racing in that, but nonetheless, is your ultimate ambition, you know, obviously you want to do well this year, and mostly people want to do more than 1 year in a series, so you'd like to do it again the year after, and get better, because that's what always happens. But am I guessing that racing at Le Mans in the 24 hours is your ultimate ambition?
Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
That would be very cool, wouldn't it?
That would be surreal. I think I'll keep pushing that goal, and I'll do it if I'm 50 or 60. I'm one of them, I want to do it all. They're like, oh, Caitlin, what's your goal? I want to do everything. But no, Le Mans is amazing. I think, again, it's the rush of trying for everything to fall into place. Don't get me wrong, you have to be a great driver to be a part of that event as a whole, but to work together as a team, to have everything kind of fall in the right place, all your pit stops, 23 pit stops, it's like just, I think it's insane. And the history behind it, and the speeds, the technology, there's so many variables nowadays. To compete at Le Mans, I think, is a real amazing achievement for a lot of drivers, but to finish it and then to either podium or win is, in my eyes, unreal.
But not impossible for you.
Not impossible. Nothing's impossible.
Not impossible. Because everything you've done, from being the little girl that fell in love with karting, age 7, in rural New South Wales, to now racing in the Porsche Sprint Challenge GB in that, it's quite a journey, and you should be pretty proud of yourself, really.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah.
Is your dad proud of you?
I'd like to think so. Yeah.
I bet he is. I bet he is.
Yeah. No, I'm sure that they are. It is surreal.
Not just your dad, the whole family.
Yeah. No, for sure. It is surreal when you look at it like that. I think, like any sports person or any athlete, when you're immersed in your own life, you only see what you want to see, and sometimes it is nice to kind of take a look back and see where you've come from and how far ultimately you have come. And yeah, little 7-year-old Caitlin would be absolutely over the moon to know that she was getting reflected in the industry with a Barbie car. I think I've just achieved ultimate peak coolness from 7-year-old Caitlin, so that's pretty cool.
Ultimate peak coolness. I reckon that's a good note on which to end. Hey Caitlin, it's been lovely talking to you.
And you, thank you.
As always.